Okay. Hello, and welcome to Cahnmanns Current Events Roundtable Discussion. And today we have Cahnmanns Gonzales. He is our author, and we're going to welcome him back because we already did one on his book, Deep Survival, and we're going to be doing it on why. And let's see, we want to make sure we say the right title, Lawrence. Everyday Survival, Why Smart People Do Stupid Things. And I want to welcome you back to our show.
Thank you.
Do I get a handshake? Thank you. And let me tell you a little bit about Lawrence. Lawrence grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and you were born in St. Louis, and you grew up in San Antonio, Texas, correct?
Yes.
And he's the author of numerous books, including the bestseller Deep Survival, right here, Who Lives, Who Dies, and Why. And he has won 2 National Magazine Awards and Distinguished Service Awards from the Society of Professional Journalists. He has appeared as speaker before many groups, the Santa Fe Institute, Legg Mason Capital Management, and Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, and the Sloan School of Management at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And your recent book that you wrote after the book that we're going to be doing today is Lucy, correct?
Right.
And that's about a hybrid person that is half human and half bonobo. He's not a monkey, he's an ape.
That's
bonobo
right.
ape. Okay. I always think of monkeys as monkeys, but they have categories. And we will get around to Lucy. In fact, I invited Lawrence for another show that we're going to be doing on Lucy. But today we're going to be doing one on everyday survival and why smart people do stupid things. So, Lawrence, that's a big title, and I'd like you to tell us a little bit about that book and why, I know you went around with Deep Survival you went to firefighters, you went to the military, you went to investment firms, you went even to cancer survivors. Why did you do this, and also why did you write the next book on the one that we're going to be talking about today on this deep survival, everyday survival, and why people do stupid things?
Well, first of all, the talking to the various groups that you mentioned was important because Deep Survival is a book about how people get themselves into trouble and then what makes the difference between those who get out of trouble and those who don't get out of trouble. So in the case, for example, of cancer survivors, I had found out from the doctors who treat these people that a lot of times 2 people will have exactly the same diagnosis and the same prognosis, and yet one will fight and survive while the other just sort of gives up and succumbs to the disease. And people wanted to know, why is that? It looks like these 2 people should do exactly as well.
Right.
And yet one dies and one lives. So really Deep Survival was about that. But in the process of writing the book, I discovered that these same principles apply to things like when businesses fail or when marriages break up. And so it turned out that a very diverse group of people was interested in that subject and wanted me to come and talk to their groups. So I happily did that. When I finished Deep Survival, I still had a lot more questions in my mind, and I wanted to apply my research to larger questions of survival. Deep Survival largely talks about individuals surviving and the things that go into making an individual's decision-making process and then the outcome of those decisions. In everyday survival, I wanted to consider some much larger issues like the survival of people as a species. And so my research became much more, let's say, scientific and deeper.
And also, I remember you did a study, and that's how Lucy evolved, but you did a study on groupness, and that was really interesting. And that was something that Henry, I think it was Tajfel or something, T-A-J-F-E-L, it's a French word. He's a social psychologist, he coined the word. And Judith Rice Harris, author of No Two Are Alike, we talked about groupness, and you did a study on bonobo monkeys, and I'd like you to explain for our audience what that was about and how we're going to fit this in on our recent book that you wrote on the other survival book on why people do stupid things. Smart people do stupid things. Not dumb things, not dumb people, but smart people, and I think that's important.
Well, one of the talks that I give, since you were talking about my talking, is called Intelligent Mistakes. And the subtitle is the same as the subtitle of the book, Why Smart People Do Stupid Things. And when I talk about intelligent mistakes, I mean mistakes that people make because of their own systems of learning, which are very intelligent systems, but that sometimes learn the wrong thing for the situation they're in. And one of the chapters in this book is called groupness, and as you say, it's a psychologist's term. It's not a real word in the English language, it's a fake word. But they use this term groupness to refer to the fact that people and other animals, lots of other animals, form groups. They form in-groups. And these in-groups have very strong implications for the way we behave in the world. As soon as people form an in-group, they begin to set boundaries. There are those inside the group and there are those outside the group. They tend to create culture inside the group, so they'll have their own jargon, they'll have their own languages in some cases, they'll have their own ways of doing things. So you can define a group any way you like. It could be the people on your block, it could be your religion, it could be the U.S. Marines, it could be people who play drums in bands, it could be people who ride a certain bus every day. Whatever way you define your group, it doesn't make any difference. It can form around anything. But once you've defined it, it has these really strong boundaries. And the more you invest in this group, the stronger those boundaries get. And the significance of those boundaries is that people tend to defend the group. And so they reject everything from outside the group. And this has tremendous significance when you're doing something like running an organization. For example, you're running a business, a big business, let's say, that has lots of divisions in it. Well, inside this business, there are all these little subgroups that are defending against each other and competing with each other. So it can have a great deal of, there can be a great deal of conflict within a company. I do an analysis in this book of how NASA managed to crash the space shuttle twice because of this phenomenon of groupness and rejecting information from outside the in-group. So it can have really serious consequences.
You know, you talked about Enron, which was very interesting because you had executives were accepting as normal what was in fact illegal without even being able to remember that they crossed the line. And that was kind of interesting because this was a group, and the Enron group, and everyone did what they were supposed to do, even though they knew that this may not be legal. Can you talk a little bit of what happened, why that Enron group kind of accepted something as normal and it was illegal at the same time?
Sure. Within the group, the things you do set up their own norms. And the more you do them, the more used to them you become. It's very easy to edge over the line. One of the things I talk about in connection with Enron is what I call mental models. I don't call them that. Psychologists call them that. Mental models are a hot area of study. And this is an important concept to understand if you're going to understand what happened to a place like Enron. A mental model is simply a mental representation of something. So if I show you a sign for handicap parking, you will see immediately will recognize that as a person in a wheelchair. However, if you look at the sign carefully, you'll see it really doesn't look anything like a person in a wheelchair. It's just some abstract lines. But there's enough information in those abstract lines to call up a mental model that you have stored of a person in a wheelchair. Every time we see something that we've never seen before, the brain attempts to match it to one of our stored mental models. And if it doesn't match, then the brain has to create a new model for it. And this is a system that's developed over millions of years of evolution that makes getting through the world easier than it would be if we had to stop and examine everything every time. So for example, you can look at a Dalmatian